Our world is filled with mystery. Mystery that lies in vast and unexplored places. In the relics of ancient civilizations whose truths are lost to time. In the secrets we keep and the ones that are kept from us. We seek answers to these mysteries, no matter how fanciful they may seem.
Human beings believe in weird things because we are pattern-seeking creatures, just like any other creature that is out there.
These are some of the great unsolved mysteries of our world. Their obscured truths fertile ground for myth-making. The possibility of alien life in the universe has been a source of fascination for as long as we have explored the stars. With this fascination comes the pervasive and seductive suspicion that proof of such life exists on Earth and has been actively hidden from us. Tales of alien conspiracies and cover-ups date back to the aftermath of World War II. In June 1947, a search and rescue pilot claimed to witness 9 strange discs flying over Washington state. About 2 weeks later, a rancher in Roswell, New Mexico, William Mac Brazel, discovered unusual debris from some kind of crash. When the wreckage was collected by the US Air Force, they issued a press release stating that a flying disc had been recovered, a report they swiftly retracted.
A lot of people saw this. It was a big shiny silver thing. The bits of debris looked like flying saucers. The eyewitnesses jumped to the conclusion that, aliens were involved.
Reports of strange flying objects in the sky are older than the United States. But here is a picture that was released just today. It shows 4 luminous objects in formation in the sky over Salem, Massachusetts.
Within a month, the media had received over 850 reports of UFO sightings. Then, in 1955, the US government opened Area 51 in Nevada and started testing revolutionary new flight technology, further fueling the perception that the government was testing alien technology at this mysterious new site.
The Area 51 myth is not entirely without justification. It's just that folks didn't know what they were seeing or what they were responding to. So there were indeed aircraft that folks were seeing.
But these aircraft were not extraterrestrial in origin. In the early 1950s, the American government wanted to develop a new kind of spy plane, one that could fly higher and be less likely to be shot down over enemy territory. But they needed a location, somewhere remote enough to develop and test their new technology away from prying eyes. This is how Area 51 came to be nestled deep in the Nevada desert. The first spy plane developed there was the U-2. During the Cold War, it flew reconnaissance over countries like the Soviet Union, Cuba, and China. From its high altitude, it could capture wide areas. But at Area 51, the unusual capabilities of the U-2 sparked rumors of unidentified flying objects over the Nevada desert. And each subsequent aircraft designed and tested at the facility further stretched the boundaries of known technology. And of course, the government couldn't explain what it was people were seeing. And so, the mystery of UFOs around Area 51 persisted as the site remained shrouded in secrecy.
Anytime you have secrecy, there's a vacuum of information. And so what fills that vacuum? Usually misinformation and speculation and conspiracies and theories and wild ideas.
People believe that there's an alien in there, that there's an alien spacecraft. They wonder what they're doing, and the government says nothing, right? The silence, in many ways, is deafening.
General Accounting Office is looking into the July 1947 crash retrieval of a disc and alien beings, because there's been a big cover-up about it for many years.
The US government only formally acknowledged the existence of Area 51 in 2013, when they declassified documents relating to the development of the U-2 and A-12 aircraft.
When the government reveals information about classified areas such as Area 51, more often than not, it's to calm people down and to point out that even though we might have fascinating fantasies and mythology about these particular areas, more likely than not, it's something completely mundane and it's just a storage facility.
So Area 51, like Roswell, still holds weight today because it's intriguing and it's a symbol. It's a symbol of things that people want to know but can't know, or things that they think can't be known.
In 2019, one poll in America found that 68% of respondents thought the US government knew more about UFOs than it said. That same year, 1.5 million people RSVP'd to a Facebook event, all committed to a single bold mission. On the 20th of September, they would gather at Area 51 and storm the facility to uncover the supposed truth about aliens hidden within.
We're outside of Area 51, and I decided to come out because of the festival and thought it was a really funny joke, and I'm like, hey, why not go?
Now, as you might imagine, this did not go over well because it is a actual real military base with actual real guards and surveillance. Like, it was all like, hey, let's all rush Area 51 and see what happens. Like, they can't shoot all of us. Well, actually, they can. They didn't, but they could.
While the storming of Area 51 may have been a joke on the part of the group's organizers, it symbolizes a long fascination with the secretive base and the mythologies surrounding it. Mythologies that show no sign of fading. But Area 51 is not the only site around the world that is shrouded in mystery. For one such site, its actual location has been sought by writers, historians, and adventurers for generations, perhaps hoping the myth is in fact an ancient reality. Thousands of years ago, around 360 BC, ancient Greek philosopher Plato first wrote the story of the island of Atlantis.
Plato basically gives an analogy, and he talks about this culture, the city of Atlantis. And it's not the Atlantis that you might expect. The original description of Atlantis is depicted as authoritarian, warlike, cruel.
It is the story of an ancient and powerful civilization, a war fought 9,000 years earlier between this great civilization and a primeval Athens. Plato situates this ancient civilization west of Greece, past the Straits of Gibraltar in the Atlantic Ocean. The inhabitants of Atlantis were half god, half humans, who had created a highly moral utopian society and were said to be a great naval power.
He explains how the central city is based on concentric circles of water and of land, and it's very much laying out this very idealized city. This is being presented as a model for exploration of good governance, of how the ideas of the dialogue Timaeus can be put into practice in Atlantis.
Their eventual downfall began with the moral corruption of their society, a descent into human weaknesses, such as pettiness and greed, until one day, the ancient gods became angry with them and sunk the Atlanteans into the ocean during a terrible night of earthquakes and fire. Opinion was, and remains, split on whether the story is true or whether it is in fact an allegory or morality tale.
But of course, as time went by, that philosophical exemplum became some sort of historical fact, and people began to believe post-antiquity that in fact Atlantis really existed, and Plato was recording in myth a historical event.
The question is, of course, where is Atlantis? And depends on who you talk to. Some people believe that Atlantis is in the Pacific. Some people think that it's actually in South America. There's dozens of different people who are sure they have located Atlantis somewhere in the world.
Some link the inhabitants of Atlantis, who disappeared when their island supposedly sank into the ocean, to the lost Minoan people. The Minoans were a highly advanced seafaring civilization who lived on the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea.
It is regarded as one of the main contenders because, in fact, the society was destroyed historically by a volcanic eruption. So places that have signs of geological activity and destroyed civilizations, not only in modern Greece, but all over the world, claim that they are, in fact, the site of the real Atlantis.
But the Minoan theory relies on an alternate interpretation of Plato's writings, which would place the island of Atlantis in the Mediterranean rather than the Atlantic Ocean. But this is only one of many theories. Countless scholars and enthusiasts have sought to piece together geographical or historical evidence in search of the true Atlantis. In the 20th century alone, dozens of archaeological teams have claimed to have found the mythical city in places as far-flung as Bolivia, Turkey, the Caribbean, and elsewhere.
It is part of a really stimulating and exciting idea, and there is a lot of kudos associated with a person who can find something that people have tended to believe, in fact, didn't exist. But what if it did? And what if you found it?
The thing about this is that because this is chasing a fictional place, people can look wherever they like. They can look in the Mediterranean, they can look in the Atlantic Ocean, they can go off to Barbados, the Bahamas. The possibilities are endless.
While there is no definitive evidence of the existence of Atlantis, there is also no definitive evidence that it doesn't exist. More than 80% of the ocean has never been explored or even seen by humans. Might Atlantis be yet to be discovered?
Atlantis is very much a myth. From the information we have from Plato, from the dialogue, there is no evidence on location, on size, or on date. People desperately want it to be true. They desperately want to be able to find something that has remained hidden through so many years. It's an idea that sits very comfortably with a lot of other conspiracy theories, that there is a truth out there if only you look hard enough for it. In some ways, Atlantis is the perfect story, the perfect myth for our post-truth era.
And so, the legend of Atlantis and the flicker of hope that it may one day be discovered lives on. Until that day, it remains the stuff of legend. Tales of hidden wonders and places still to be discovered exert a powerful hold over our imaginations. But this fascination extends to people and stories that the public cannot allow to be put to rest, especially when these figures disappear, seemingly without a trace. In June 1937, American aviator Amelia Earhart began her second attempt to fly around the globe. If successful, she would be the first woman ever to do so.
Amelia Earhart is a significant figure still today because of what she represents for women. A person who is willing to put herself out there, to buck trends at the time, and to show women new possibilities for who they could be.
Accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan, Earhart took off from Miami, Florida on the 1st of June. They planned refueling stops around the world, including through the Pacific Islands, on their way back to the west coast of America. On the 2nd of July, they left Papua New Guinea, headed for Howland Island, a tiny atoll in the Pacific Ocean. It was so hard to locate that 2 US ships were positioned on the flight path to help mark the way. A US Coast Guard ship, the Itasca, was also waiting just off Howland Island to maintain contact with Earhart and guide her in. But Earhart and Noonan would never arrive at the tiny island. In her final transmissions, Earhart is said to have become increasingly frantic, radioing that she was low on fuel, that she couldn't see the ship below and her final position. An extensive search of the region followed, but on the 19th of July, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. The shocking and unexplained disappearance of Amelia Earhart quickly evolved into myths and conspiracies.
Anytime notable people die suddenly or inexplicably or vanish, it is inherently interesting, right? Because we sort of feel like that doesn't happen to normal people. But if it's a prominent person, if it's a politician or a star or somebody notable, suddenly there's something intriguing and mysterious about it.
The official version is that Earhart and Noonan likely went down in the ocean around 100 miles away from Howland Island. It's believed Earhart did make it close to the island as her radio transmissions to the Itasca became stronger and stronger. Her last transmission was reportedly so strong, the radio operator ran out onto the deck of the ship to see if he could see her plane in the sky. Yet no ship searching the area found any trace of a crash site. Not even an oil slick in the water. So where were they?
Some of the conspiracy theories about Amelia Earhart are that her plane didn't really crash, but that instead she was deflected and either lived alone on an island for the rest of her life or became a spy.
There's this sort of image that people have that out there in the Pacific, there are all these little islands, you know, they could have crashed and swum to these islands. There's no way of knowing because the Pacific Ocean is absolutely vast. There's a lot of aircraft wreckage on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Some of it may be Amelia Earhart's aircraft. We just don't know.
For 5 days after the disappearance on July 2nd, 1937, people reported hearing what they believed was Amelia Earhart's calls for help on their shortwave radios. Even as far away as Florida, where a teenage girl was playing with her family's radio when she heard a woman's voice cry out, "This is Amelia Earhart, help me." Regardless of what you believe actually happened, Amelia Earhart's disappearance continues to captivate the public, as possible explanations for the mysterious disappearance have moved into the realm of mythology.
I think this is an enduring conspiracy theory, in part because of Amelia Earhart's celebrity, right? She was extremely well known around the world, but also because she's such an important historical figure, the first female to fly across the Atlantic.
Couldn't have a more accomplished and more competent pilot than Amelia Earhart, and I think that's what's the great tragedy about this story. Yet, it's one of these mysteries, since we don't know technically what happened at the very end. It just gives people the opportunity to speculate.
In the absence of any real evidence, the truth remains shrouded in mystery. A truth that maybe only Earhart and Noonan will ever know. The sea has claimed many famous victims, even an Australian Prime Minister. On a warm summer's day in December 1967, Prime Minister Harold Holt drove to a beach near Melbourne for a day out with friends. His plan was to go swimming, but he never made it back to shore.
Harold Holt was the 17th Prime Minister of Australia, a Liberal leader. He was someone who was very active in politics and was a very keen swimmer, a sort of an outdoors kind of person.
Holt was a conservative who, as Prime Minister, strengthened Australia's relationship with the US and expanded the nation's involvement in the Vietnam War. He was also a socially progressive leader. He was responsible for dismantling overtly racist policies that restricted migration to Australia and championed a 1967 referendum that led to Aboriginal Australians being counted in the national census for the first time. On the day of Holt's disappearance, witnesses described the surf as particularly turbulent and the tide as being unusually high.
What has been generally assumed is that he overestimated his swimming ability, even on a beach that he was very familiar with.
One friend who was at the beach that day saw Holt pulled out to sea. In her words, it was like a leaf being taken out, quick and final. Despite a significant immediate search effort, Harold Holt's body was never found, leading to a number of competing theories.
Some have theorized that Holt faked his own death. Others theorized that the CIA had him killed, and by some lights, he defected to communist China.
There's a lot of myths in regards to why he might have disappeared, what could have happened to him. Some people even believe that he might have been taken by a submarine from a different country. Some people believe that he might have had even more stranger things happen to him, since we never managed to find evidence of his remains.
Holt's progressive politics and Liberal Party factional battles were also touted for reasons for a possible suicide. Theories run rampant, filling the void left by the lack of any evidence of his death. Tall tales of espionage and secret plots, perhaps more appealing than the banal truth of his accidental drowning.
Investigations into Harold Holt have pretty much concluded into the idea that he may have been taken away by a riptide rather than any other kind of nefarious opportunity.
And yet, the myths live on, complete with continued conspiracy theories surrounding the circumstances of that day.
Conspiracy theories often express who we are at the most existential level. And in that way, they express our hopes, our fears, and what we value, and so on. So I find conspiracy theories about death to be one of the most interesting types of conspiracy theories. And people just don't want to think that someone that they hold up as that kind of icon can die in such a senseless way.
The idea that an extraordinary man could have died in such an ordinary Australian beach tragedy continues to lend fuel to the myth, even today. While sometimes it is the story of a person's life or death that is the subject of myth, there are also some historical sites which appear so fantastical that we build mythology around their very existence and how they came into being. The 3 pyramids at Giza in Egypt are a wonder of the ancient world. Built between approximately 2550 and 2490 BC, the first built and largest is the Great Pyramid, or Khufu, after the pharaoh who built it. Standing 481 feet, or 147 meters tall, each of its roughly 2.3 million stone blocks can weigh over 2 tons, with each stone carved to fit perfectly together. While the exact methods of building the pyramids remains unknown, mathematical principles such as Pythagorean theorems, trigonometry, and algebra were used in the design of the pyramids. This ensured that each side of the pyramid was nearly perfectly aligned along the cardinal points of north, south, east, and west. Long before the Greeks and Romans were building their empires, the Egyptians had accomplished this astounding feat of engineering and construction.
The very famous pyramids of Egypt have attracted all sorts of theories as to how they were made. Probably the most famous or infamous of the alternative explanations for the creation of the Egyptian pyramids is in fact they were built not by people, but by aliens.
The sheer genius of great engineering marvels like the pyramids often seem impossible, creating a mystery that lends itself to the bizarre or supernatural explanation of their existence.
We can't possibly figure that out, so it must be aliens, right? They're perfectly aligned geometrically, so there must be some magical explanation.
This idea appears in fiction in the late 19th century in a book called Edison's Conquest of Mars, but becomes a serious theory only in the late 60s in a book called Chariot of the Gods by Erich von Däniken, sold tens of millions of copies, with the idea that the ancient Egyptians couldn't have done this 4,500 years ago. It must have been the aliens.
In support of Erich von Däniken's thesis, it has also been suggested that the layout of the three pyramids aligns with the stars in Orion's belt. And the well-preserved nature of each pyramid, compared to other buildings constructed later, is also seen as evidence of alien technology. Additional speculation about how these massive stone blocks were moved into place provides further fuel to those who claim alien involvement.
People think that he couldn't have possibly built them for a number of reasons. One is the necessity of sourcing wood to build sledges to bring the stones to the site, and there are no trees around the area, and there weren't. The binding used between the stones, but particularly the getting the stones up the side of the pyramid. And so people have speculated the Egyptians couldn't have done this.
This kind of mythologizing using actual historical artifacts is known as pseudo-archaeology. Hard to debunk as it uses real-world objects as evidence to support a theory, yet chooses to ignore other inescapable evidence which doesn't fit the theory. Evidence like the discovery in the 1990s of the graves of the pyramid builders.
This is the first time that we know that the Egyptians built the pyramids, and also in the same time they were not slaves. They built the pyramids through the love of the people.
Or the more recent discovery at an ancient rock quarry in Egypt's eastern desert, where researchers found a stone-carved ramp system that may hold the key to technology used to build the pyramids. This ramp had stairs carved into either side, with holes that may have held a series of wooden posts. Such a construct would have been used as a rope and pulley system, where two men stood above the rock and two below, all exerting force through the rope to push the rock up and out of the quarry. This ramp was steeper than previously thought possible and dates back to the time the Giza pyramids were built, proving that technology existed around 2,000 years earlier than previously documented. And yet, the myth that aliens built the pyramids refuses to fade.
When you look at Egyptian pyramids and you realise that these artefacts are thousands and thousands of years old and are so complex in their design and structure and manufacture, perhaps aliens have been an alternative answer because people can't really wrap their head around that thousands of years ago people all over the world had such advanced technology.
Myths that stem from a disbelief in the technological capacity of ancient civilizations are also heavily biased against Black people, indigenous people, or other people of color, who were the builders of these ancient wonders.
You'll notice, interestingly enough, they're always about the Egyptians or the Mesoamericans, the Peruvians. We never come up with these about the Greeks for some reason. We can believe great, aqueducts built by the Romans and so on because they're a great and noble culture. But when it comes to people in the Middle East or Mesoamerica, we think, they couldn't have done it. It must have been aliens.
These theories don't exist at the fringes of popular thought. A US study conducted in 2018 found that 41% of people believed that aliens had visited Earth in the ancient past, and 57% believed that ancient civilizations, such as Atlantis, existed.
It's very difficult to debunk a myth when there's little evidence to prove it wrong, but this is a fundamental problem of the nature of knowledge and the nature of study. No one can prove a negative. We cannot prove that things did not happen.
From the emptiness of the desert to the vast, endless oceans, both are places that swirl with mystery and myth. Our oceans span more than 70% of the surface of the Earth and are a source of many tales of the unexplained. Not far off the southeast coast of the United States lies one of the most notorious stretches of ocean in the world. Known as the Devil's Triangle, Limbo of the Lost, or Bermuda Triangle, a swathe of unexplained disappearances and calamities have taken place in a specific section of the Atlantic Ocean.
I think people look to this area of the map as a place of mysterious occurrences because of all the disappearances of planes and ships. Where else could they go? What must be going on in this area in order for large objects to disappear entirely?
One of the earliest recorded tales of the Bermuda Triangle came from Christopher Columbus, who wrote of a faulty compass, strange lights, and a burst of flame falling into the sea as he approached Bermuda in 1492. It is believed that in the past 500 years, 50 ships and 20 planes have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle, many without a trace. One of the most notorious stories took place in December 1945. 5 torpedo bombers took off from Florida on a training exercise and disappeared somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle. Not long into the flight, the pilot of the lead aircraft, Flight Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported being unsure of their position as he was unable to see land or the sun, and when instructed to fly west, said they didn't know which direction was west. The crew radioed a series of increasingly panicked updates back to their base before cutting off abruptly. A rescue plane sent to their last assumed position would also go missing. No trace of the 5 bombers or the rescue plane was ever found.
We never found evidence of those planes, and the recording by Lieutenant Charles Taylor was very misleading and confusing as to what was actually happening. He seemed to refer to lights. He certainly seemed to be very disorientated. There's all sorts of theories that abound out there as to what might have happened in the Bermuda Triangle.
Bizarrely, the Bermuda Triangle isn't an isolated stretch of sea. And yet, vessels have entered the area, never to be seen again.
In many of the cases, these disappearances were not unusual. They happened during storms. In some cases, they happened in the North Atlantic. They happened in other places that had no connection to it.
But when no trace of a crash site remains, a lack of definitive answers feeds into the mythology.
In many ways, the Bermuda Triangle is sort of a manufactured mystery. There's a grain of truth to it. There are disappearances, but of course there's disappearances all over the world. And given how commonly traveled that particular patch of ocean is, there's actually surprisingly few disappearances.
So these articles come out and say, gosh, why have so many planes and ships crashed in this one area? Turns out that it's not an inordinate number. It's statistically what you would expect based on the number of ships and planes that traffic through that region.
But the truth that the statistics tell is not as seductive as the mystery that surrounds those well-known tales of unexplained disappearances and bizarre eyewitness accounts. We connect to stories more readily than we do to pure data, and so the myth of the mysterious Bermuda Triangle lives on. Each new encounter adds to the intrigue that surrounds this stretch of ocean, reinforcing a preconceived notion of what the Bermuda Triangle is and confirming a pattern that we expect. In part, these myths are so enduring because they are a fulfillment of prophecy, predicted or anticipated in some way. Prophecy is at the heart of another myth, hundreds of years in the making. In the 16th century, fascination with supernaturalism and prophecy was on the rise. Many believed in the ability to see the future. Enter French astrologer Michel de Nostradamus, known now as Nostradamus.
Nostradamus is a figure of the early to mid 16th century. He was a writer, a philosopher, a thinker. And he wrote in this very metaphorical, elusive, poetic style.
Having first run a reasonably successful medical practice in the 1530s, despite having never received a medical degree, Nostradamus turned his attention to releasing prophecies in around 1547.
Nostradamus was a fortune teller, essentially, what they would call a seer. And seers were actually quite common at the time, and important figures made decisions on the basis of what seers said.
His early efforts at predictions were circulated in annual almanacs and were widely read. He also worked as a mail-order astrologer, though he was reportedly vague and evasive, choosing to write in French regardless of the language spoken by his clients, and in his own handwriting, which some complained was illegible.
And he wrote in 1555 his most remembered work, which is called The Centuries. It's called The Centuries because it's written in quatrains, which are groupings of 4 lines of verse, and every 100 of these quatrains is referred to as a century.
This collection of prophecies caught the eye of a receptive public and the French royal court, and has since remained in circulation for over 450 years. His early prophecies, such as foretelling the death of his acquaintance Henry II of France, and then, 100 years later, the Great Fire of London, added to his mystique in life and subsequently in death. The popularity of the collection is helped by the fact that some believe it predicts events far beyond Nostradamus's time, including many events of the 20th and 21st century.
This would be really fascinating and useful if it were true. I'm not mocking him or believers in him when I say that. It's just if you just read the words and disassociate it from anything else, I think you would see that it offers almost a paint-by-numbers template over which you could superimpose almost any great event.
This is exactly what happened in the aftermath of the attack on the World Trade Center in New York City on September the 11th, 2001. In one such example, the verses circulated in the media were actually written to demonstrate how easy it is to use vague language to create a prophecy that can be linked to any real-world event.
So many people believe that Nostradamus predicted the French Revolution, that he predicted 9/11, that he predicted the rise of Hitler and things like that. But if you're sufficiently general in your predictions, those things can be read in by people who want to read them in.
Followers of Nostradamus point to multiple prophecies that they believe foretell the rise of Hitler and his role in World War II. One prophecy, for example, talks about he who by his tongue will seduce a great troop, which Nostradamus devotees have taken to be a prophecy about Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Nazis, even though it could apply to any military leader.
Another example is a prediction he gave about Germany and a war and a phrase called hister, H-I-S-T-E-R. So many people have said, well, he's talking about Hitler. It's right there. No, he's talking about hister, which is a river. So, sure, if you change hister the river to Hitler the dictator, then it all fits. But if you have to change it, then you're changing the prediction.
I mean, what you'd need to do if you wanted to read him fairly and fully would be to immerse yourself in the languages in which the text is written, and then to spend your life learning about the culture of that time so that you can try to figure out part of what the meaning might have been. That's what real disciplined scholarship requires of us. And so if you're just reading kind of a paperback version translated into modern English, you're not getting even most of the surface there.
While it may seem simple to debunk Nostradamus' prophecies, they continue to appear in news reporting and popular culture.
People want to know what's going to happen. They want to be able to lift the veil and see the future. And Nostradamus seems to offer that.
I think people want to believe in Nostradamus because they want to believe they have more power over the world than they in fact do, that there's a trajectory that's foreseeable, and that even if that trajectory that's foreseeable includes unpleasant events, at least we know what those events are, because the future is one of the biggest sources of anxiety for most people.
Myths are often perpetuated and strengthened the more they are told and the more time that passes. Nowhere is this more true than in instances of alleged sightings of mysterious creatures and monsters that are the stuff of popular legend. Part ape, part human, hairy with long arms and giant feet that had supposedly left footprints as large as 40 centimeters long. It is a creature that goes by many names.
In America, it's called Bigfoot. In Canada, it's called the Sasquatch. Of course, it's the Yowie in Australia and different versions other places around the world.
The creature was allegedly captured on film for the first time in 1967, but reported sightings across North America date back more than 150 years earlier than the year the first video evidence was captured. The video of Bigfoot is perhaps the most well-known, but also the most contentious piece of potential evidence. It was filmed at Bluff Creek, California, the same place as a set of Bigfoot footprints that were discovered 9 years earlier, which would seem to support the validity of the video, except the footprints would later turn out to have been a hoax.
The fact that this film is so old, and to this day is still cited as the best evidence, is really suspicious, because people have, smartphones and cell phones and high-definition cameras and drones. I mean, there should be much, much better evidence for Bigfoot rather than this film from 1967.
While some scientists concede that it's possible there is an undiscovered large primate in the world, it is incredibly unlikely, and there is still no irrefutable evidence to prove Bigfoot's existence.
The other approach to look at it is from a biological point of view, right? Because if Bigfoot are real, then they're living, they're breathing, they're eating, they're killing, they're mating. There has to be more than one of them, right? In fact, the estimates are there would have to be between 6,000 and 10,000 of them in North America alone. So where are they, right? There can't just be one Bigfoot. So there should be thousands and thousands of them. Surely at least one of them would have dropped dead of old age, been hit by a trucker along a road, shot by a hunter, and yet nothing. Very mysterious.
Until such evidence exists, Bigfoot will remain a mysterious figure and a feature only of fantasy films and literature that capture the world's imagination. On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, another famous mythical creature continues to draw tourists and creature hunters to the lakes of the Scottish Highlands. The modern legend of the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie as she is affectionately known, began with a newspaper article in the Inverness Courier in 1933. A couple were driving down to Loch Ness and witnessed the water of the lake displace as a huge creature emerged from the deep. While they waited to see if the creature would appear again, it did not. But from this single momentary sighting came a legend that would live on for decades to come.
The following year, in 1934, there was a famous photograph that was taken by a guy named Kenneth Wilson. It's known as the surgeon's photo. And this sort of became the iconic image of Nessie, is this serpentine silhouetted head coming out of the water. Unfortunately, it was shown to be a hoax. Nevertheless, it was enough to spur a tourist boom.
Today, a visitors center stands beside the loch, where tourists can buy Nessie merchandise, ranging from books and water bottles to stuffed toys. And many continue to visit the shores of the lake, hoping to catch sight of the mysterious creature.
So people go to Loch Ness, and of course, they're well aware that there's supposed to be a monster there. If they see anything weird at all, well, it's Nessie.
For these creatures of legend and myth, any activity, even if later proven false, helps to whet the appetite of a receptive public.
There is a branch of pseudoscience called cryptozoology. This is the study of creatures and animals that are considered to be mythical or extinct. And these people believe that if they use modern technology and they just try hard enough, they will be able to catch a glimpse of these mythical creatures.
Some even believe that Nessie was a descendant of the aquatic dinosaur called the plesiosaur, a creature who lived in freshwater environments, much like that of Loch Ness. Though scientists do point out that this particular loch was only formed some 10,000 years ago during the last ice age, and the plesiosaur lived more than 100 million years ago.
I hold the world record for the longest continuous vigil hunting for the Loch Ness Monster, and I've been sat here for 27 years, watching and waiting, trying to solve what is one of the world's favourite mysteries.
Unfortunately, this is highly unlikely to happen.
Despite the low probability of success, our fascination with these mythical creatures and our desire to catch a glimpse of them continues to burn brightly. Perhaps fueled by our longing for the possibility that we share our home with something magical and secret, waiting to be discovered. We are captivated by the endless possibilities of the unknown or undiscovered, in tales of strange places and occurrences that defy explanation.
Myths and folklore can be useful in a variety of ways. One main way is to help understand the context of beliefs, right? Because folklore is literally the lore of the people. It's legends, it's rumors, it's conspiracies. So these myths and legends, they're not sort of some archaic, dusty things that need to be in a museum somewhere. They're all around us. They're influencing us all the time. And that's why we need to understand them.
From supernatural creatures to mysterious locations, from futures foretold to lost civilizations and ancient wonders, we create myths and legends that have endured for centuries,